Okay, now Phoebe, while I'm doing this, I need you to be quiet, okay? Okay. You said you wanted to be in the video. Can you say hi, church people?
Hi, church people.
All right. You're going to sit here and watch Daddy do his video? Where are you going to sit?
Here.
Do you want to sit over there in Daddy's chair?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
On unicorn, see the camera.
See the camera?
Yeah, can you see it so small?
Yes, they can all see the unicorn.
Lord.
Phoebe, I need you to be quiet, okay? Because it's recording. All right? All right, ready? Watch. Okay. You actually may experience time a little bit differently. Some people have said that if you took Phoebe, it is on the earth. So that means that here on earth, 1 second is 1 second. If you go...
I don't know what did that.
I know.
Daddy, I'm coming down.
Yes, I know. Okay, I'm gonna... Hey, Ezra. Ezra, okay? We're going to be right back down, all right?
Then I'll be right back.
All right. Did you know that time is not necessarily a linear concept? It's something that we have been able to compute for a long time, and we've actually even been able to measure it on different spacecraft. If you were to take the sun, for example, and then smash it down until it became a black hole, you could actually see that there's a difference in how time passes at the edge of that black hole versus right here on Earth. Because here on Earth, 1 second equals 1 second because we're right here on Earth, right? But if you were to take the mass of the sun and shrink it down to a black hole, because of something that is called gravitational time dilation, you would actually have 1 second at the edge of that black hole equate about 3 seconds here on Earth. It's crazy math, and it's something you could definitely make very, very, very complicated. But what I want to subject to you is that if time is just another thing, if it's really fundamentally no different than the length of something, the weight of something, it's no different than any other physical descriptive attribute of a thing, doesn't it make sense that God is not bound by that thing? I mean, just think about that for a second. I mean, our entire experience of life is bound up in how we chronologically see events, right? I mean, I go through periods that are exciting and I'm very excited. I go through times that are, full of great trials or even sadness, and then I'll find myself, questioning God's goodness and, God's faithfulness to me. But I'm doing that because I exist inside of a time and a place, but God existed outside of that. What we read in Genesis is that in the beginning God created. That implies that God existed far before you ever had a creation, before you had time. And that has some interesting implications. One of the most fascinating implications, I think, is the fact that that means the whole story was written before we experienced it. Think of it as a novel. Some people look at God and they think that he's this all-powerful wizard and that events are taking place, and as they take place, God is the all-powerful wizard, is ensuring that things happen the way that he wants. But that's a very inaccurate read because that wizard still has to exist inside of our experience of time. God, having existed before time, he wrote the entire novel. He knows the beginning, the middle, and the end. And when we sit here and we think about great movies or great novels, then we know the end, and because we know the end, we only struggle so much with things in the middle. We don't look at things in the middle and then get mad at the author because it's unfair, because we know that there is a conclusion and we're able to kind of deal with that. This is something you actually see explained to an extent in Ecclesiastes. So it's not just a modern thing that we talk about because we know about physics and have science and sensors and things like that. So what you're going to read here in your small groups is how Solomon talks about the mystery of time. But more importantly than saying that there is a mystery of time, Solomon actually goes in and says, why does this matter to me? How does understanding that there's a mystery to time, and how does understanding that God is beyond time impact how I relate to God and how I react to circumstances in my life? This idea that time is something that shouldn't impact how we react to our circumstances is something that wasn't lost on individuals who were actively writing portions of the Bible. Something that you see in Psalms 102 is actually a psalmist going through and kind of contemplating that they are experiencing things that are certain kinds of tragedies or troubles, and yet they understand that God is eternal. Now, there's something in there that's worth kind of breaking apart. We think of something being eternal as something that always has been and something that always will be. But if you think about that definition of eternity still implies being inside of that timeline. But that's not really the eternal that we have a picture of when it comes to God. When we say God is eternal, we don't mean that, oh, he always has been and he's here right now and he always will be. Instead, what we mean is that God is all time embodied into one. And so when God is hurting with our circumstances, God's hurting with it. And then sometimes we'll sit here and say, like, well, if God cries when we cry, if he mourns when we mourn, if Jesus weeps over the human condition, then why doesn't he just swoop in and save us? And what we don't understand is that God has all time written all at once. He has written the glorious part. He has written the good story ending. He knows that in some cases there's going to be worldly good news stories that take place following our tragedies. But even for individuals who may go their entire lives and experience time and then get to the end and say, I never saw my good news story, they still have that glorious conclusion. And this is what we see in Revelation. What you guys will read in your groups, in addition to that Psalms 102, is you will see where that faith in eternity starts coming to fruition. Revelation is about everything that's yet to come for us. But what we have to remember is that this isn't an aspiration of God. This is something God has already written. The novel has been published. The covers are on the book. And Revelation is the glorious good news story ending to this novel that we're all living right now. And so when we sit here and we go through trials and go through tribulations, what we find our faith in is not in the fact that, if I just name it and proclaim it, God will give it to me. And it's not in the fact that if I believe hard enough, then God's going to give me my worldly desires. It's not even necessarily in the fact that I'm going to see some kind of justice that to me makes sense. And that means God's good because I see my version of good. Instead, God is going to be good and God is going to be glorious because God has written a glorious ending. One of the most beautiful parts of that section that we read there in Ecclesiastes was where it says that God has written eternity in our hearts. One of the commentaries I looked at in preparation for this lesson talked about the fact that we have eternity in our hearts, which means that we're bent on eternity. We want that conclusion that we know is written in eternity. We want the things and the understanding and the knowledge of what God has done across the entire novel. And because we can't get to that ending, sometimes we are left frustrated. And in our frustration, we end up going to worldly things. We end up looking for worldly justice, and we end up looking for reason and explanation in our worldly circumstances. Sometimes as Christians, we end up going to very bad, very corrupted philosophies because we want what we want. But the story of the Bible is one that points us towards embracing what we don't understand. Understanding that we have eternity written in our hearts, that there is that part of us that wants and that craves that knowledge of God, but yet the knowledge of God that we're going to have is not going to be us knowing everything. It's not going to be us being able to do everything. It's not going to be us being able to will whatever we want in this world. It's going to be us relying on God. It's going to be our dependence on our Creator, which some might even call faith. That's what this whole thing is all about. And that's why it's valuable to understand and embrace what it means for there to be an eternal God. Because when we embrace the fact that there's an eternal God that is not bound to our circumstances, that is not bound to our understanding and our experience of time, then suddenly we realize that our faith is not based on some aspirational wizard or overlord trying to create some kind of future that they want to happen, but instead our faith is in a God who has already written the victory. That's our lesson that I have for today. I hope you're able to get something out of it. And until we can meet again, God bless. Come here. You want to say goodbye to church? You want to say goodbye to church people? Okay. We'll say 1, 2, 3, and we'll say bye church people. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Bye, church people. Good job.